Hello and welcome to another episode of Taking the Supply Chain Pulse. I'm Megan with St. Ange Company, and I'm here to introduce Stuart Wooster, who got his start with healthcare supply chain and is now employed as a supplier. His experiences from both sides of the track is what landed him a spot on this week's episode. Take it away, Fred.
Today we're going to talk with an old friend and colleague of mine, Stuart Wooster, who has gone to the dark side after several years in healthcare supply chain, and now he's working on a supplier side of the spectrum. And I wanted to bring Stuart in today to sort of talk about what he's seen and what he's learned from a different perspective, and also how suppliers view providers, and what can we learn so that we can work together better in the future. Stuart, welcome.
Hey, thank you, Fred. Appreciate it very much.
So you're in Lewiston, Maine today, right?
Well, actually Brunswick, Maine, but yes, it's
okay.
A lovely area.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. Beautiful up there this time of year. You guys get black flies, don't you?
Oh, yes, we do. If you're not used to that from the Midwest, like I am, it's quite the adventure. Or unless you go to Canada for fishing, for instance. But yes, black flies are a real thing.
We have midges, 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 not midgets, midges. And those things are little bugs, and they're out right now. And God, you open your mouth and about 100 fly in. It's terrible. We have them twice a year. In fact, one time years ago during the Major League playoffs, they disrupted the Yankees pitcher Jabba Chamberlain because he couldn't pitch because of the midges. So that's what we're dealing with now. Other than that, everything's great. So, Stuart, tell us a little. I've known you now for over 20 years. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, where you've worked, some of the positions you've had, and where you are now and what you're doing.
Absolutely. Again, like I mentioned before, started in the Midwest. Actually went to work for a biotech company, as I like to say, growing bacteria and viruses on purpose for vaccines. So it was really a good learning experience. It was a division of Wyeth, Fort Dodge Labs, great people, great products. Learned a ton in the process, and had the opportunity to finish my MBA while there and the pivot into procurement. It was one of those, I love the story. It was one of those moments where at 4:00 on a Friday, the head of HR calls you up and, whatever I broke, I'm sorry, I'll fix it. But he was responding to an old application I made for a procurement or purchasing agent role. And I made my entree back then and haven't looked back. So it's a neat learning experience.
Well, when I met you, you were at Iowa Health in Fort Dodge, Iowa. Tell us about that.
Great place to be. Love it. It was a great organization. We had a lot of fun, especially in supply chain. We really learned a lot. Moving from what I would consider a cooperative health system to truly more of an integrated delivery network model, especially on the supply chain side. We really had, I think, a good esprit de corps built there, collaborating between the senior affiliate hospitals. So my role there as director of materials was to oversee purchasing and internal distribution, the mailroom, and then eventually laundry distribution. So it was also a real eye-opener moving from manufacturing procurement of chemicals and services, but primarily raw materials, to the finished good or the product side, which most of your audience completely understands. You're buying finished goods that coming from a distributor, or sometimes directly from the manufacturer, especially for the high-end materials. But it was always a cost-conscious environment. Value is really what we're driving, and I create the value equation that I have used all my career, where value is the function of quality, service, and cost. Quality, service, and cost equal value, whatever mix it is for that particular good or service or commodity. But we really, during our times at Iowa Health, I think made some good progress, making sure that one, patients were always cared for, and two, go ahead.
Let me ask you a question. And I'm going to get off this real quickly because you and I could talk about this for a whole day. Did being a member of Iowa Health benefit your hospital to have to have been the question that one of my colleagues here asked, and I just wrote an article about, is bigger better? And my answer was no, better is better. Best practices are better. Bigger is not necessarily better. And
I concur. Yeah.
Quite honestly, since it's been so long ago and none of the people are still around, I asked you this question in it's a loaded question because, in my opinion, having also been in that same IDN at that time, bigger was not better. You were doing a great job by yourself, but did Fort Dodge Hospital positively benefit financially from its association with Iowa Health System?
I would argue that ultimately, yes, in the strategic perspective that was prevailing at the time. Did it truly put forward best clinical practices throughout the system? I'm talking about Iowa Health. No, because you should focus on what area hospitals are best in the purest form of that. In reality, community hospitals, even the larger ones, need to be focused on community needs. And so did we provide a good job for our community? I guess you can go back to hospitalcompare.gov to answer that question. But ultimately, if you would take your children, your family, your friends there, then the answer is yes. And I consistently did. My daughter was born there. Our daughter was born there. Later, we moved back after our son was born. So we had both kids went there. We stayed by choice for our healthcare there. So I would say yes. The organization benefited. Now, was it optimized? No, it wasn't optimized. Did they, maximum profits? I mean, I hate to say profits because it's healthcare, right? Because we're focusing on reducing people's pain and suffering. But ultimately, the CEO there taught me this phrase, or I picked up from him. If there's no margin, there's no mission.
No margin, no mission. Yep, that's one of the oldest phrases around. But what you pointed out, I think, is really interesting, because what I heard you say is that because of the resources of Iowa Health coming from Urbandale and Des Moines, you were able to ensure the continued success and meaningfulness of a community hospital as perceived by the members of the community in Fort Dodge. Is that fair enough?
That is.
And that's important because there are a lot of community hospitals are just completely gone now, and many others have been absorbed and turned into something other than a community hospital. And in each of those cases, at one time, those hospitals were the lifeblood of the communities that they served.
Exactly. That's very true. Frequently, the health systems are the largest employers, largest private employers.
Yep.
In a state or region. So it's important to look at them as an economic engine, not just a health service provider.
Yep. Yeah, them and the schools probably are the two biggest employers in smaller communities generally. So after Iowa Health System, you moved up to the big city, went to Milwaukee and worked at Aurora. And then after Aurora, you got a big bump and moved to Lewiston, Maine, where Muhammad Ali knocked out Sonny Liston back in 1966, I think.
Like Halasay.
and you started running supply chains. And your experience in being a full bore supply chain leader, how was that for you?
It has been a wonderful ride. The excitement has never left. The challenges have only shifted. I would tell you, and there was between Milwaukee and Maine, there was some interim positions that was very eye-opening on the East Coast, primarily because what I really learned is in healthcare, same battle, different zip code. And it's really, really true. The people who are involved in healthcare, especially supply chain, their hearts are, you could pick up conversation, and I know Fred, well, that's not easy. Fred talks to everybody, but you could pick up a conversation with anybody who's been there for any length of time, like you've known them for years. And that's just the way it is in people our line of work. Making the move back to manufacturing has been interesting in different ways. It gave me appreciation for some of the quality elements of materials that I always found odd in hospital supply chain management. Why aren't we seriously concerned about the lot traceability of products coming in the door? Now, you could say, yeah, we got the G10 and all the tracking ability now, that the software that was developed and be able to trace it. But from a proactive standpoint in healthcare, we don't really track that. We rely on the manufacturers, and the FDA does too, for good reason. Because in the manufacturing site and the company I work for currently, quality is absolutely number one. Probably if it has a moment of hesitation, it's behind safety of our employees. Safety is top notch. Quality is also top notch, and we take concerns and variances very seriously, to the point that some of our suppliers don't send us Christmas cards anymore. But in reality, it's up to us. We're the first line of defense. Well, manufacturers are, I suppose, but we're the first line of defense in bringing all the products together in a quality way. You can't build quality in after the fact. It's got to be there from the beginning. And I'm very proud. That's a non-negotiable for me. I'm very proud to work for this organization because we take it very, very seriously.
Well, that's interesting. You said something that I was thinking about this morning. When you get old, you just walk around, thoughts jump in your head. And one of the things that I thought about was, I know that I started out long before you did in healthcare in a much simpler time. But we reposed all our trust in the suppliers. We thought that the suppliers were going to do things right. So we expected American Hospital Supply, for example, to get our stuff to us when we ordered it. We didn't have any systems.
That's cardinal for the rest of us.
Yes, I know.
I remember.
I said that on purpose, just so that. But and it worked. I mean, it worked. And our job then was transactional. It was never operational. It was never strategic. It was just transactional. Get what the doctors want, order it, and make sure it gets there on time. And it was much simpler because, number one, most of the places were community hospitals, so there wasn't the great complexity that exists now. And number two, those guys were good at what they did at that time. And in recent years, there have been more and more disruptions. And whether it be weather related, whether it be geopolitical, whether it be financial within the healthcare industry itself, to the point where now healthcare supply chain leaders are expected to know something about supply chain and to lead supply chains. So you came out of the supply chain leadership role at a time when that was getting more and more important, and went into a supplier. Can you pronounce the name of your company? Because I don't pronounce it correctly.
Absolutely. It's Mölnlycke. It's Swedish. And there's actually a town in Sweden called Mölnlycke. It's outside of Gothenburg. That's where the company has its origins.
Well, I'm glad I asked, because I would have screwed that one up.
There'll be a quiz
Okay.
later.
So what differences have you seen from working, in the caregiver side, and what you discovered when you've gone back? I mean, you started out in biotech, but now you've gone back into tell us what your company does, just for many people that might not know. And what difference have you seen, though, when you've entered in there, as to how your company perceives, A, the supply chain, and B, the interrelationships or interactions with the customers?
Absolutely. My company first, it's a med tech company, makes medical devices. The division I work for is the biggest of the four. It is advanced wound care. Now, there's some basic wound care in there, but what we produce primarily is some of the advanced wound care. How advanced wound care is different than basic wound care is a moist wound. What we discovered 60 years ago as a species is that moist wounds heal faster. So Mölnlycke has developed a dressing that allows for rapid healing. It allows for prevention, which is equally important, as those in healthcare understand, especially from never events. But it allows for protection of new skin. It's a really excellent dressing. I hope you never need our products, but if you do need something for advanced wound care, Mölnlycke is what you want. That said, it's very expensive, but not on a per use basis. And I say that objectively from the last formal hospital-based value analysis project I was involved with, long before I knew it was coming to Mölnlycke, did a comparison between Mölnlycke and a competitor. And while the per use cost at that time, 5 years ago, was more expensive, the marginal cost was lower because you use less of them. So that's all part of the value analysis process. In healthcare, we're all used to that. But the harder stuff to measure, patient outcomes. faster healing, less pain, better patient compliance. It's all right there. If it's easy to use, it's safe and less pain involved. So it's good. So you got a wound care division. You've got the ORS division, operating room supplies, which is custom kits. Oddly enough, Melinka is the largest custom kit manufacturer in Europe. And dressings, drapes, gowns. You can come to the U.S. primarily, not kits though, to the U.S. And then there's the antiseptics division. You may have heard of HibaCleanse, and then surgeon gloves, which is the first exposure I had when you and I were at an IDN function. I think we were in Cedar Rapids for that one, weren't we? Looking at surgeon gloves, which were crazy expensive, but very popular among surgeons for the tactile experience. So it's bottom line, better outcomes for the clinicians, make for happier clinicians, and ultimately less ulcers for supply chain leaders in healthcare.
Before we dive back in, you may be asking yourself, is my supply chain future ready? At St. Company, we don't just optimize logistics, we engineer smarter, leaner, and more resilient systems from end to end. From manufacturing to retail to healthcare, our experts bring decades of experience and cutting-edge strategies to transform your operations. Visit and discover how we're shaping the future of supply chain, one solution at a time.
So getting back though, what difference have you seen in how the supply chain is regarded and how it operates from the supplier side versus the provider side?
Sure. Provider side, it's I would consider still more transactional, more GPO dependent. Of course, the larger IDNs will go after higher and higher amounts of spend and bring that in-house and manage that themselves. And they should. There should be a threshold where you let your GPO, your group purchasing organization, run with it. Whereas in manufacturing, we have that to some degree. But there's category managers to help with certain multi-factory or multi-region suppliers. So it's better coordinated, better leveraged with visibility of the numbers and the usage and the authority. We tend to be more intimately familiar with the manufacturers, right? Because we're buying all the components, putting it all together. And when there's a problem with a lot or a production process or printing on a label, you have to work with suppliers and partner with them to get it done. Every supplier has their issues. The distributors, it's a manufacturing error. Well, come to find out that typically those distributors will allow for deliveries from certain manufacturers one time a week. And if they miss the window for whatever reason, either timing or logistics problems or maybe, payment issues, then suddenly they're a week out or 2 weeks out or whatever it is. And so it's not necessarily a manufacturer back order issue. It could be a lot of steps in that supply chain. But whereas when I was in healthcare, I would rely on my primary distributor and some of the individual relationships for the physician specific items. Here there's a lot of people to touch base with, a lot of data points to manage in terms of the supplier, the vendor master file, which we have recently 2 years ago, opted to maintain that as an add-on to our ERP system. And just a lot of activity with that I, for one, am looking forward to AI taking more of that responsibility because it's just a lot of administrative tasks. But so a lot of, I guess, ultimately working closely with your suppliers, knowing who they are, at least the big ones. You always, 80% of your time on 20% of the suppliers. Pareto had it right from the get-go, but it's knowing who they are and how they operate.
Well, is it fair to say that you can't afford not to pay attention where you are? And I'm not saying that healthcare doesn't pay attention. What I'm saying is you have two actual supply chains. You have the supply chain that comes to you with the components needed to produce your products, and then you have the supply chain that pushes the finished product out to the people that are buying your products. Is that fair?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So on the first side, you have to pay assiduous attention to these guys because if you don't have things, it interrupts the manufacturing process. And on this side, you have to pay attention because if you don't have tight relationships, the stuff doesn't get where it's going and you lose customer trust, if you will. Is that fair?
Correct. That's very true. Interestingly, at least in our organization, where I was used to having full control over every product movement in healthcare. Not the case in this organization. Everything inbound is really under my purview. Outbound, not so much. Now, when there's problems with outbound, do I get involved? Sure. But there's only so much I can facilitate. I can influence, I can suggest. I guess that's true for any leader. But you work together to overcome obstacles, because ultimately at the end of the day, it's about bringing products together and getting them to the end user to accomplish your mission.
So you'd say that your chief focus is on the manufacturing side of the equation, and the other side would be transportation and logistics, which when you were in healthcare was taken care of by the distributors. If you think about it, they got the stuff to you, you know. The one thing that I always thought of, or just since I've been at St. Ange, was that when I was running supply chains, I was always dealing with the sales team of the supplier. I never dealt with the supply chain folks. You didn't even know they had them. I mean, I knew they had them, but I never dealt with them. How do you folks look at the people who purchase you? How do you interact with customers is what I'm trying to get at.
Well, we do have a patient advisory board or customer advisory board of clinicians. In our case, wound and ostomy care nurses, right? That can give feedback. Interestingly, we're going to have a virtual customer care visit tomorrow morning, actually, Eastern, 8 o'clock Eastern time, for our whole division to take part in, to help educate the internal folks at Milica. I'm in a unique position, right? I was in healthcare. I understand that world. I know the pains and the pleasures of it, but most of my peers do not. So if this company is trying to raise that bar by helping everybody understand better why it is we're doing what we're doing, not just a patient example, but talking to the customers of the products. So if that's good, I would think that for the most part, people all want to do a good job, but it's up to us to educate them. And that's as true as, within the purchasing function at healthcare as it is in manufacturing. At the end of the day, my responsibility in this role is to ensure that the proper goods and services are delivered on time at the right cost, the right quantity for the organization to meet its needs.
Okay, so given the current state of uncertainty and disruption that's out there, and are you planning to make any changes in anticipation of upcoming events? How is the present uncertainty affecting your company?
Well, I'd like to say I have a direct line to the White House, but I don't. I think there's always going to be uncertainty. We didn't start the fire, as Billy Joel likes to say, and it's just about trying to read the tea leaves and navigate through. During COVID, when I was in healthcare, prior to the COVID hitting, I said, you tell me the disaster, I'll give you the plan. But what I learned from that is your core products, your core services, your core needs, you always have to have a plan B for everything. So we have been working on dual sourcing or localized sourcing, localized being from a global sense, anything in North America, trying to bring products in and getting them validated for use. You would think that inkjets and inkjet is inkjet. Nope, not the case. So there's a lot of complexity on our side to make sure that happens. It takes time. It's expensive, but we're doing that. We just got final approval for parametric release on sterilization from a second chamber for a company. If I said the name, you'd know them, in Atlanta, that we can release our sterilized products from, and that's taken 18 months to get done. It's just challenging. Everybody's running lean, but we got it done. So it's being on top of all the things that could come your way, knowing who your sources are, having dual sources, managing your raw material inventory levels as needed. Tariffs, I personally treat them like a tax. We don't know if they're going to be here long term or not. So we are taking steps to become more sophisticated in terms of foreign trade zone, and that is going live as we speak. So but that's not tariff related. Hopefully we'll have some ultimate help with duties long term, which I think financially will be. In fact, I'm pretty confident it will. But kudos to our finance team for heading that one up. No, just knowing who your supplies are, knowing your options are, and being flexible.
But what you've told me is that your company is alert to the stuff that's going on, and you're trying to plan and react proactively so that you minimize any surprises that may occur. Is that fair?
Correct, correct. And when you do that, be prepared. And I encourage everybody to do that. If you haven't done it, make sure you have that lined up. Be prepared for having your finance team push back, because when you deleverage yourself from a supplier, your marginal costs will increase.
Well, now that you've made the dive into the water of what we would call the bad guys if we were in supply chain, not really. Have you ever thought about a return to the healthcare provider side in the future?
Well, I wouldn't be completely honest if I didn't say, yeah, I have. It would be a good way to transition as I'm entering a new phase in my life, to go back to my roots and to really bring the value of what I've learned in manufacturing, in my couple years of interim travel and consulting, from my positions, in Iowa Health and Aurora, to really bring that leverage to bear, for what I consider the truly meaningful work, getting closer to the patients. That's really what we did it for. At least that's what I did it for. It was always to make life better for our family, friends, and neighbors. And my teams, wherever I've been, have heard that exact phrase. What we do for our families, friends, and neighbors.
Yep. So, what specific things have you learned that you didn't know before you got on this side of the transaction? Would you take back and start to try to implement on the acute care side?
I would say that for any price negotiations, approach them with a critical eye. Really press your GPOs. Really challenge your own teams locally to get to the right cost, because there is margin there. Now, should there be margin there? Absolutely. It drives R&D, it drives development, it drives improved processes. What got us here today won't get us there tomorrow, right? So there needs to be R&D happening at these manufacturers. But how much is enough? When you're in healthcare, if you're making 3% margin at the end of the year, you're a rock star. Now, we could discuss that there's physician salaries and administrator salaries and insurance costs for risk mitigation that need to be managed, right? But if also from a valued former CEO, if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys, right? So you got to have the right people with good leadership skills calling the shots. It's about getting the mission accomplished in a way that's sustainable, that everybody can live with. It's consistent. It'll be there tomorrow. And so you want the right people doing the right work. That said, in supply chain, it's quality, service, and cost in the negotiations that drive value. So make sure you stay focused and objective on that. Don't go in blind with it. Do your research. Gosh, with AI as it's coming along, there's ways that you can anticipate, and it'll only get better as we can share it. But tie into your networks, tie into your peers to know where the costs are, what better practices there are, understand the cost drivers with your supplier. That's true in manufacturing and healthcare. Understand better how you can find the win-wins, and the wins will come to you.
That's great, Stuart. So one final question. What advice would you have for suppliers and healthcare organizations and how they should interact with each other in the future?
I truly believe it needs to be more collaborative as time goes by. Suppliers, yes, if they're in a true competitive environment, they're going to need to protect their elements. But I can tell you right now that a lot of the smaller suppliers that I've dealt with work with some of their competitors in an I don't say under the table, but in an offline, confidential sort of way where they can support each other to keep the doors open. Now, the big boys wouldn't do that, and I get that. But you need to collaborate. Your people, you run the risk of losing your people anyway. You might as well attract the good ones that want to come to your organization, build your culture such that that everybody's committed to quality and growth and value creation as much as you can. But no, suppliers, I think, and systems are going to be more collaborative, especially as the costs of healthcare in the United States continue to go up. We're in Maine, fairly rural state, right? We're looking at one hospital closing at the end of this week, and we're going to lose a couple more in the weeks and near-term years ahead, especially as budget constraints hit from Washington, and they don't want to fund those levels unless these health systems can really keep costs low to provide what is exactly needed in the right quantity and quality, which always should be good quality, right? We're going to continue to have our mission eroded underneath us. So pay attention, be proactive, work together, work with the legislatures, make sure that your costs are in control and your quality is always top notch.
Yeah. Well, Stuart, thank you. Yeah. Fort Dodge is still in business, right?
Yes, they are. Very proud of that town, very proud of that hospital and that system.
And the reason I say that is now Iowa Health is now known as Unity Point. So sure. that is an example of which bigger made it possible for things to become better and for a community to retain its focus and its the heart of its community's healthcare because of the added resources that the larger IDN was brought to the operation. Fair enough?
They would have really struggled with their cardiac and orthopedic programs in that region of the state without that greater support.
Well, Stuart, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. I've always wondered what it was like on the other side, and now you've given me some insight. And what I think I heard you say also is, we can communicate with each other, we can cooperate, and we can both succeed. Is that fair?
Absolutely true. If you take away anything, take away that.
Okay, Stuart, thanks so much for joining us. And it's good to talk to you.
Fred, an honor and a privilege. Thank you.
Well, that's all for today. Thanks again for joining. And as always, don't forget to subscribe and connect with us online where you can find all of our episodes. If you have a topic you would like to discuss or want to be a guest on the show, you can reach out to Fred directly at FCRANS@STONGE.com. See you next time.